Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we are specifically going to talk about Week 8 box office for Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. What did Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves accomplish this week? There's a little bit of good news. Let's celebrate it, right? So, one, we got to give the full context. So I'll say it real quick. Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves was an incredible attempt by Hasbro to make a real Dungeons & Dragons blockbuster, American blockbuster movie, and to start a Dungeons & Dragons cinematic universe. It would cost $150 million. That was the budget on the movie alone. The marketing budget was at least $100 million, maybe as high as $200 million, right? So there was between $200 and $350 million minimum invested in this film. This is a real attempt to make Dungeons and Dragons, to make the Dungeons and Dragons cinematic universe, and it failed. It commercially failed. It was a commercial failure. It was shockingly a massive. It was surprisingly a very large, very significant critical success. Not only did critics love it, but everybody who saw it loved it. It was like, the only people who gave bad reviews to this movie were people who were very, very strongly anti-D&D, in my humble opinion, right? You could find them, but they're like 1 in 100, right? And when you get reviews like that where they're 1 in 100, what you're really seeing is you're seeing a situation where, the movie is reviewing the person. That happens, and I think Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves is a movie that reviews the reviewer, right? Like, you're like, no, this is a good movie. Everybody saw this. Nobody walked away with complaints. You got a bee in your bonnet, buddy. So, like, that's the reality. Let's talk about Week 8. All right, so get this. What did Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves achieve in Week 8 in its American box office, in its American box office period, right? So there's a period where the Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves is in the top 10 on the American box office list, right? So I listen to Grace Randolph every week. I've listened to her for 10 years, right? And, I have literally hundreds of videos that mention her. And she's my metric, right? Like, when I see the top 10 domestic, box office every single week. And every single week, right? Like, I see it, right? And so, seeing that it's a big deal, right? And like, it's really kind of interesting to see, where this flows out, right? And so what's very fascinating is it made the top 10 this week. So Dungeons & Dragons is on the American Blockbuster top 10 list this week. Now, what's incredible is it only made $390,000. It didn't even make $500,000, and it was the 10th on the list, right? So the question is, how long can Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves remain on the top 10 list? I didn't think it would be on the list this week. It made it there with $390,000 in sales, right? Now, do you know why the sales are that low? A couple reasons. The movie is available for digital right now, right? That hurts it, right? Because people are like, well, do I go to the movies, or do I, buy it for $25 and I own a digital copy forever? The other thing that is interesting is it is available to stream for anybody who has Paramount Plus, right? So if you're going to buy the movie for $25, you might not want to do that. What you might want to do is go to Paramount and buy 2 months of Paramount Plus. You'll get to watch Dungeons & Dragons as much as you want for 2 months, and you'll get all of Paramount Plus's other content, which includes Star Trek, Tulsa King, 1883, 1923, fantastic shows, Evil, lots of good content, right? And so that's another purchase option. What's really astounding, what is really incredible, is you have this situation where Dungeons and Dragons is, so this like Dungeons and Dragons taking one more week on the list and saying, I'm still here. I'm still an American blockbuster attempt, right? Like, is incredibly important because Dungeons and Dragons tooth and claws its way beyond the tabletop role-playing game scene, and this is why it continues to crush every OSR and every indie out there, and no OSR, no indies. I've never heard a single creator say, you know what, my tabletop role playing game is a good tabletop role playing game. That's nice, but what really matters is, can I get my tabletop role playing game to be discussed by people who are completely outside of the tabletop role playing game scene? And that is why Dungeons and Dragons not only is working hard to grow Dungeons and Dragons, it is working hard to even bless the OSRs and the indies, and that blessing is not returned. The OSRs and the indies absolutely despise, at the macro level, their game masters, their players, their creators despise Dungeons and Dragons, talk crap about it without nonstop, even as Dungeons and Dragons is laboring to give them sales. And boy, if you think I'm wrong, just take a look, man. There are Dungeons and Dragons sold more Paizo books this year than Paizo did this year, right? Their mistakes sell more books for Paizo than Paizo's greatest accomplishments, right? And so it is really fascinating. So week 8, there was a Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves achievement. It stayed on the top 10 with 390,000. One more thing. I pay attention to Dungeons and Dragons, but that teaches me about the world. And what I know is, if you can stay on the top 10 domestic, right, of the American blockbuster list without even 500,000 in sales, movies are desperately in trouble. We literally are having a conversation as a society on whether we will keep movie theaters around, right? And and Dungeons and Dragons is part of that, right? Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves is not just a Dungeons and Dragons product. It is an attempt to keep the American blockbuster industry alive. And that is literally millions of jobs, right? And so, and a part of our culture. So Dungeons and Dragons is truly an element of Americana, a part of American culture, and it is massively important. And nothing being done on any OSR or any indie game even has the concept of pushing their achievements beyond the tiny little niche TTRPG. And that's why Dungeons and Dragons is so special to me and so wonderful, and why it is due respect, whereas OSR and indies truly aren't. They're not picking up their weight, right? Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.